On September 15, 2025, Luca Di Maio walked into Kering's Paris headquarters as the company's new CEO. He was replacing François-Henri Pinault, the man who had spent 2 decades building Kering into one of the great luxury empires: Gucci, Saint Laurent, Bottega Veneta, Balenciaga, an empire worth 20 billion euros in annual revenue at its peak. 34 days after taking the job, Di Maio sold the crown jewel of everything Pinault had spent the last 2 years building. On a Sunday night, October 19th, Kering and L'Oréal jointly announced a deal worth 4 billion euros. L'Oréal would acquire Kering Beauté, including the House of Creed and 50-year exclusive licenses to make beauty products for Gucci, Balenciaga, and Bottega Veneta. The timing was not a coincidence. Kering's third-quarter results were days away. The Wall Street Journal had already broken the story the day before. Di Maio needed investors to wake up Monday morning knowing he had already done something drastic. Here's the thing. Kering had paid 3.5 billion euros for Creed alone just 2 years earlier. They spent hundreds of millions more building a beauty division from scratch. Pinault had a plan, a real one. It was supposed to be his legacy. They sold the whole thing for barely more than they paid for one piece of it. So what happened? How does one of the great luxury empires end up in a Sunday night fire sale? The answer is a story about a plan that was right, launched 2 years too late into a crisis that was already unstoppable. To understand why Pinault builds a beauty division in the first place, you need to understand what Kering looked like at its peak. In 2022, Kering was a machine. 20 billion euros in revenue, operating margins of 27%, and at the center of everything, Gucci. Gucci alone generated close to 10 billion euros that year. It was the engine that powered the entire portfolio, so profitable it essentially subsidized Saint Laurent, Bottega Veneta, and Balenciaga while they found their footing. But Pinault could see the problem forming. Gucci's momentum was built almost entirely on one man, creative director Alessandro Michele, who had more than doubled the brand's revenue between 2015 and 2021 with a maximalist, logo-heavy, Baroque universe that felt genuinely new. By late 2022, that universe was starting to feel dated. Michele left the company. The next collection struggled to connect. The brand that had been the hottest thing in luxury was suddenly searching for an identity. Pinault needed a backup plan, something that didn't depend on Gucci. His answer was beauty. He wanted to do for fragrance and cosmetics like Kering had already done with eyewear. For years, the houses had been licensing their beauty out to third parties. Coty held the Gucci fragrance license. Pinault wanted to bring it all in-house, control the image, capture the margins, build a platform. In February 2023, he announced Kering Beauté. In June 2023, he made the anchor acquisition, 100% of the House of Creed, for 3.5 billion euros. Creed was founded in 1760. Their fragrances sell for $300 to $500 a bottle, the largest independent player in high-end fragrance, generating over 250 million euros in revenue with exceptional margins. Pinault called it Kering Beauté's first strategic initiative. He hired Raffaella Cornaglia, a former Estée Lauder executive, to run the division. The plan was to use Creed's global distribution network as the backbone, plug in Gucci, Balenciaga, and Bottega Veneta fragrances, build at scale, and reduce Kering's terrifying dependence on one brand. It was not a bad plan. It was actually a smart plan. The problem was that while Pinault was spending billions building his new growth engine, the old one was already burning. In November 2022, Kering issued a press release announcing that Alessandro Michele was leaving Gucci after nearly 8 years as creative director. The statement was warm. It thanked him for his passion, imagination, and inventiveness. It spoke of an extraordinary journey. Michele himself said their visions had diverged. Nobody in the industry believed a word of it. Michele had more than doubled Gucci's revenue between 2015 and 2021. He had built one of the most distinctive creative universes in modern luxury: maximalist, Baroque, queer-coded, vintage-obsessed. Under him, Gucci went from a brand searching for relevance to the hottest label on earth. Revenue hit nearly 11 billion euros, operating margins in the mid-30s. But by late 2022, growth was slowing. Wholesale had flooded the market, China was softening, and Kering's management wanted a new direction. According to multiple fashion industry outlets, the decision was driven by management, not by Michele. The warm press release was corporate language for a quiet firing. So Kering went looking for someone to rebuild Gucci from scratch. They found Sabato de Sarno, a Valentino veteran, quiet, refined. His brief, as industry reporters described it at the time, was to pivot Gucci away from Michele's maximalism towards something more wearable, a quiet luxury reset for a brand that needed to find a new customer. In September 2023, De Sarno unveiled his debut collection. Kering had planned a massive takeover of Milan's Brera district, a statement show that would announce a new chapter for the world's most watched brand. Then it rained. The location had to be changed at the last minute. The grand statement became a scramble. The collection itself, calm, pared back, what critics called an aesthetic cleansing, landed without the impact Kering needed. One analyst said it failed to generate buzz and excitement. Another wrote that Gucci fans weren't ready to go on a diet after 10 years of Michele's maximalism. The show got polite reviews, not great ones. Here's the problem with what Kering was trying to do. Quiet luxury is not Gucci's identity. It never was. Consumers who wanted understated bought Bottega Veneta. They bought Loro Piana. They did not buy Gucci, a brand whose entire cultural position was built on bold logos, Baroque excess, and the kind of design that makes people turn their heads. Asking Gucci to become quiet was like asking Versace to become Hermès. The DNA doesn't allow it. And while the creative direction was failing to connect, a second problem was making everything worse. For years, Kering had pushed Gucci product through wholesale channels, department stores, multi-brand retailers, to hit revenue targets. That decision killed the brand's exclusivity. When a Gucci bag is available in every department store in every city, it stops feeling like a Gucci bag. The numbers arrived quickly. Gucci revenue was down 6% in 2023, then down 23% in 2024, from nearly 10 billion euros to 7.7 billion in a single year. By the third quarter of 2024, comparable sales were down 25%. The first 9 months of 2024 alone saw revenue fall from 7.6 billion to 5.9 billion. Kering's group operating income collapsed from 4.7 billion euros in 2022 to 2.5 billion in 2024. Net income fell 62%. The stock lost more than 60% of its value from its 2021 peak, and Kering was now carrying 9.5 billion euros of net debt against an operating income that had been cut by 2/3 in 3 years. De Sarno was shown the door in early 2025, 2 creative directors in 3 years, no clear answer to what Gucci was supposed to be. Somewhere in the middle of all this wreckage, Kering Beauté was posting a 60 million euro operating loss in the first half of 2025 alone, 300 million in annual sales, less than 2% of Kering's total revenue, too small to matter, too expensive to keep. Pinault's backup plan was bleeding money. His main engine was in freefall, and analysts at Bernstein were now publicly calling for tough but essential medicine. That medicine arrived on September 15th. His name was Luca de Meo. De Meo came from the car industry. He had rebuilt Renault. He had turned Cupra, a brand that barely existed a decade ago, into one of Europe's fastest-growing car labels. He was hired as a turnaround specialist, and he moved like one. His mandate was clear: cut debt, fix Gucci, stop the side quests. 34 days into the job, he announced the sale of Kering Beauté to L'Oréal for 4 billion euros in cash. He chose his words carefully: a strategic alliance, a decisive step. He pointed to L'Oréal's stewardship of Yves Saint Laurent to Beauté as the proof of concept, a partnership that had turned UYSL Beauty into close to 3 billion euros a year under L'Oréal management. That's what we want for our houses, he said. It was a quiet sentence, but it was a complete reversal of everything Pinault had built. Instead of capturing beauty value internally, Kering was handing the keys to a specialist and taking a royalty check. So why did L'Oréal pay 4 billion euros for a division generating 300 million in annual sales? That's a valuation of 12.4 times revenue. When Estée Lauder bought Tom Ford, they paid 3.5 times sales. When L'Oréal itself bought Aesop, they paid 4.7. This deal is 2 to 3 times richer than any comparable luxury beauty transaction. But L'Oréal is not buying a business, they are buying 50 years. The Gucci beauty license transfers to L'Oréal in 2028, when Coty's current contract expires. Gucci Beauty generates an estimated 500 million euros a year under Coty today. L'Oréal turned YSL Beauty into 3 billion. If they do half that with Gucci, this deal pays for itself many times over. But here's the part that almost nobody is talking about. Look at what this does to every other player in luxury beauty. Coty loses Gucci in 2028. That is roughly 11% of their profits. Gone. They will spend years trying to replace it. Estée Lauder gets nothing. And LVMH, Bernard Arnault's empire, the conglomerate that owns Louis Vuitton, Dior, Bulgari, and Tiffany, the most aggressive acquirer in luxury history, is now locked out of Gucci, Balenciaga, and Bottega Veneta beauty. For 50 years. Let that land. The man who built the most powerful luxury empire on earth by buying every brand that crossed his path cannot buy a single bottle of Gucci perfume rights for the next half-century. L'Oréal now controls the beauty licenses for Gucci, Yves Saint Laurent, Prada, Valentino, Balenciaga, and Bottega Veneta, 6 of the most recognizable luxury names on earth, locked up for 50 years. LVMH cannot touch any of them. Morningstar called L'Oréal the most logical buyer. They also called the price high. Both things are true. L'Oréal is not paying for what Kering Beauté is today. They are paying for what they intend to build over the next 5 decades. For Kering, the 4 billion euros buys relief. The stock jumped 5% when markets opened that Monday. Investors were relieved. But 4 billion euros does not fix Gucci. Here is the honest question at the center of this story. Pinault built Kering Beauté because Gucci was struggling and he needed a new growth engine. Domenico sold Kering Beauté because Gucci was struggling and he needed cash. Both men were responding to the same problem. Neither of them solved it. The bull case for Kering looks like this. Domenico has a genuine track record of fixing broken things. Renault, Cupra, now potentially Kering. The 4 billion in proceeds materially reduces the debt, and Kering still owns some of the most powerful brand names in luxury. Gucci at its best was one of the greatest businesses in fashion history. The brand equity has not disappeared, it has been mismanaged. Those are very different problems. The bear case is harder to dismiss. Gucci has been in decline for 3 years with no clear creative direction. The luxury market is slowing broadly. LVMH's fashion division declined in 2024, and the Chinese consumer, who drove so much of the sector's growth, is spending more cautiously. Turning around a flagship brand in a sector-wide downturn is one of the hardest things in business. And here's what should worry Kering most about this specific deal. They just handed L'Oréal 50 years of Gucci beauty, 50 years of royalties, yes, but also 50 years of someone else deciding how Gucci fragrance and cosmetics show up in the world. If L'Oréal does their job well, and they usually do, Gucci beauty becomes a 3 billion euro business, and Kering will collect a royalty on it, not own it, not control it, just collect a check. Pinault spent years and billions building the infrastructure to capture that value himself. He believed beauty was the future of the houses. He was probably right. Domenico sold it in 34 days. I think Domenico made the right call, given the position he inherited. The debt was unsustainable. The beauty division was losing money. Kering needed to prove to investors that new leadership meant real decisions, not more announcements. But the right call and the winning call are not always the same thing. Everything now depends on whether Domenico can do to Gucci what he did to Cupra. Take a brand that has lost its identity, rebuild it from the inside, and make it feel essential again. If he can, this fire sale will look like the moment Kering turned the corner. If he can't, they gave away a 50-year gold mine to survive a crisis they never actually solved. We'll know in about 3 years. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video. Do you think selling the beauty division was the right move, or did Kering just trade a long-term asset for short-term survival? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.